The champagne bubbles caught the light like tiny diamonds as I stood near the edge of the ballroom, trying to make myself invisible. The Metropolitan Club in Manhattan was the kind of place where old money went to remind itself it was better than new money, and where people like me, scholarship kids, who'd clawed their way into nonprofit work, learned exactly how invisible we could be. I smoothed down my dress for the 5th time in as many minutes. It was black, simple, bought on sale from Nordstrom Rack with a coupon. Next to the Valentino gowns and vintage Chanel surrounding me, it might as well have been burlap. More champagne, miss. A server appeared at my elbow with a silver tray. No, thank you. I still had half a glass I was nursing, trying to look busy, trying to look like I had a purpose beyond standing awkwardly near a marble pillar. My boss, Catherine Westbrook, had insisted I attend tonight's charity gala. Networking, she'd said, as if the word itself could transform me into someone who knew how to talk to people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. 3 hours in, I'd collected exactly 2 business cards from people who'd mistaken me for someone important, and had one conversation about the weather that had died after 30 seconds of painful silence. The ballroom stretched before me like a cathedral dedicated to wealth. Crystal chandeliers, the size of compact cars, hung from coffered ceilings. A string quartet played something classical and melancholy in the corner. Women dripped in jewelry that could fund my organization's entire annual budget, laughing with the kind of ease that came from never worrying about rent. And then there were the men in the far corner. I'd been avoiding looking at them all night, but my gaze kept drifting back like a compass finding north. They stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, separated from the rest of the party by an invisible barrier that everyone seemed to respect. 5 men in tailored tuxedos that probably cost more than my car, if I had a car, talking in low voices, while the party swirled around them like water around stones. Even from across the room, I could feel the danger radiating off them. These weren't hedge fund managers or tech moguls. These were the men who owned the shadows, who made the rules everyone else had to follow. And at the center of them stood Dante Moretti. I knew his name the way everyone in New York knew his name, even if they pretended not to. The tabloids called him a real estate developer, a nightclub owner, a legitimate businessman. But everyone knew what he really was. The Moretti family had controlled Lower Manhattan for 3 generations, and Dante had taken over when his father died 5 years ago. He'd consolidated power with a ruthlessness that had made even seasoned observers nervous. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 32 or 33, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes so dark they looked black from this distance. He wore his tuxedo like armor, and when he moved, people instinctively stepped aside without seeming to realize they were doing it. I forced myself to look away. Men like Dante Moretti existed in a different universe than women like me. I was here to survive the evening, maybe make one genuine connection, then go home to my studio apartment in Brooklyn where I belonged. Alexis, I jumped. Catherine had materialized beside me, her silver dress catching the light. At 60, she still had the kind of beauty that money maintained. Sharp, polished, intimidating. "You're hiding," she said. "I'm observing." "You're wasting my time and yours." She gestured toward a group near the auction table. "Senator Whitmore is over there with his wife. They've been looking for a new cause to support. Go introduce yourself. Tell them about our literacy program." My stomach clenched. "Catherine, I didn't bring you here to think. I brought you here to network. If you want to move up from grant coordinator to program director, you need to learn how to talk to donors." She squeezed my shoulder, her perfectly manicured nails digging in slightly. "Go. Now." She vanished into the crowd before I could protest. I stood frozen, watching Senator Whitmore hold court. He was surrounded by admirers, his voice booming across the space as he told some story that had everyone laughing. His wife stood beside him, smiling with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent decades next to powerful men. I couldn't do it. Couldn't walk over there and insert myself into that circle, pretending I had anything to offer people who probably spent more on wine than I made in a year. Instead, I turned toward the terrace doors, thinking I'd slip outside for air. Maybe I could regroup, give myself a pep talk, try one more time before admitting defeat. I'd made it 3 steps when someone's shoulder slammed into mine. The impact sent me stumbling sideways. My champagne glass flew from my hand, and I watched in horror as its contents arced through the air in slow motion before splashing directly across the front of my dress. "Oh my God!" I gasped as the cold liquid soaked through the fabric. "Watch where you're going." The woman who'd hit me didn't even slow down. She was blonde, beautiful, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my rent. Her friends clustered around her, and I heard one of them laugh as they continued toward the bar. I stood there, champagne dripping down my dress, the cold seeping through to my skin. A few people glanced over, their expressions ranging from pity to amusement to complete indifference. No one moved to help. I was a piece of scenery that had malfunctioned, nothing more. Heat burned behind my eyes. I refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of these people. I kept my head down and pushed through the crowd toward what I hoped was a bathroom. The hallway beyond the ballroom was blessedly empty, all marble and gilt and silence. I found the ladies' room and locked myself in a stall, pressing my forehead against the cool metal door. This was a mistake. Coming here was a mistake. Thinking I could exist in this world, even at its edges, was a mistake. I gave myself 60 seconds to feel sorry for myself, then straightened my shoulders and emerged to assess the damage in the mirror. The champagne had turned the black fabric slightly gray across my chest and stomach. My carefully applied makeup had smudged around my eyes, making me look like I'd been crying, even though I hadn't quite gotten there yet. I grabbed paper towels and tried to blot the worst of it, but the fabric just spread the liquid around, making the stain larger. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. "Where are you? Senator's asking about youth literacy stats." I stared at the message. She thought I was networking. She had no idea I was hiding in a bathroom, ruined and humiliated, counting the minutes until I could leave without it being completely obvious I'd failed. I couldn't go back out there. I typed out a response, not feeling well. "Going to head home. Sorry." Her reply was instant. "We'll discuss this Monday." I turned off my phone and shoved it in my small clutch. I'd deal with Catherine's disappointment later. Right now, I just needed to get out of this building without running into anyone else who knew me. I pushed back out into the hallway, but I must have gotten turned around because this corridor didn't lead back to the ballroom. It stretched deeper into the building toward a set of double doors I didn't recognize. 2 men in dark suits stood on either side like sentries. Before I could retreat, the doors opened. 5 men emerged talking in low voices. The same group I'd noticed earlier near the windows, and at the center of them, commanding the space without effort, was Dante Moretti. I froze. They were walking directly toward me, and there was nowhere to hide, no alcove to duck into. I pressed myself against the wall, making myself as small as possible, praying they'd pass by without noticing me. They almost did. The group was maybe 15 feet away, when one of the men, broader than the others, with silver threading through his dark hair, said something in Italian. A few of them laughed, and Dante's gaze swept the hallway. His eyes locked on mine. Everything else disappeared. The hallway, the other men, the distant sounds of the party. It all faded until there was only him looking at me with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. His eyes were even darker up close, almost black, with the kind of intelligence that saw everything and forgot nothing. He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge me beyond that single moment of eye contact that seemed to last several heartbeats too long. Then one of his men said something else, and the spell broke. Dante's attention shifted, and the group continued past me. I could smell expensive cologne and cigar smoke as they passed, could feel the displacement of air as they moved. I exhaled shakily, my heart pounding against my ribs. Relief flooded through me. I'd made it. I could slip away now, get my coat, go home, and try to forget this entire disastrous evening. I'd made it maybe 5 steps toward the main corridor when I heard his voice. Wait. The word wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority, the kind of voice that expected obedience and received it without question. I told myself he couldn't be talking to me. I kept walking. You, in the black dress. My feet stopped moving before my brain consciously decided to obey. I turned slowly, my pulse thrumming in my throat. Dante Moretti stood 20 feet away. His companions had stopped as well, watching me with expressions I couldn't read. He studied me with that same unsettling intensity, and I became acutely aware of the champagne stains spreading across my dress, my smudged makeup, how completely I didn't belong here. Come here, he said. Not a request, a command. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But you didn't refuse men like Dante Moretti. Not if you had any sense of self-preservation. Not if you'd heard even half the stories about what happened to people who crossed the Moretti family. I walked toward him on shaking legs, stopping at what I hoped was a respectful distance. Close enough to be compliant, far enough to maintain some illusion of safety. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Tall, at least 6'2", with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that made the hallway feel smaller. There were subtle signs of violence that money couldn't quite erase. A thin scar along his jawline, another through his left eyebrow, the slightly crooked set of his nose that suggested it had been broken at least once. What's your name? His voice was smooth, almost gentle, which somehow made it more dangerous. Alexis. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Alexis Chen. Something flickered in his expression. Interest, maybe, or calculation. You work for Catherine Westbrook, he said. Not a question. How did he? The Westbrook Foundation, he continued, still watching me with those 2 dark eyes. Youth literacy programs, after-school initiatives, scholarship funds. Your organization has been trying to get a meeting with my family's charitable trust for 8 months. I stared at him. How do you know that? I make it my business to know who's operating in my city. He tilted his head slightly. What happened to your dress? I glanced down at the stain, embarrassment flooding back. Someone bumped into me. It was an accident. No. He said it with absolute certainty. It was a message. They were teaching you that you don't belong here. The casual observation hit harder than I'd expected, because he was right. That was exactly what it had been. The question is, he continued, stepping closer, are you going to accept the lesson? I should have nodded, should have agreed, backed away, and gotten as far from him as possible. But something about his tone, the assumption that I would fold, that I was as weak as everyone here seemed to think, sparked anger in my chest. I don't need lessons from people whose biggest accomplishment is being born into the right family. The words were out before I could stop them. The hallway went absolutely silent. The men behind Dante went still. One of them, the silver-haired one, made a subtle movement toward his jacket, but Dante raised one hand slightly, and everyone relaxed. Then, impossibly, he smiled. It transformed his face, softening the harsh lines without making him any less dangerous. If anything, the smile made him more intimidating because it suggested he was genuinely entertained rather than offended. "Interesting," he murmured. He turned to his companions and said something in rapid Italian. They dispersed immediately, moving back toward the ballroom with coordinated efficiency that suggested military training, leaving me alone in the hallway with Dante Moretti. His smile faded, but his attention remained fixed on me. "Walk with me, Alexis Chen." He started down the corridor without waiting for my agreement, moving deeper into the building's private areas. Every instinct screamed at me to run back to the safety of the ballroom, to find Catherine, to get out of this building and away from him. But I followed. Pride or curiosity or possibly stupidity made me follow him through increasingly quiet hallways, away from the party, away from witnesses, into whatever came next. We walked in silence, through corridors that grew progressively more isolated. Dante moved with the confidence of someone who owned not just buildings, but the very air inside them. I struggled to keep pace in my heels, the click of my footsteps echoing off marble walls. He stopped at an unmarked door, produced a key, and pushed it open. Inside was a small library I hadn't known existed, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture that smelled of tobacco and old money, and windows overlooking Central Park South. The city glittered below us like scattered jewels. Dante crossed to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He held one out to me. I didn't take it, and what is this? Whiskey, 30-year-old Macallan. He set the glass on the table beside me when I didn't move. "You're afraid of me." "I'm being cautious around a man who pulled me into a private room." "Smart." He took a slow sip from his own glass, his eyes never leaving my face. "But if I wanted to hurt you, we wouldn't be having a conversation." The statement should have terrified me. Instead, it clarified something. I was here because he'd chosen to have me here, which meant he wanted something. And people who wanted things could be negotiated with. I picked up the whiskey and took a careful sip. It burned beautifully down my throat, warming me from the inside. "Why am I here?" I asked. "Because you're the first person at that circus downstairs who said something true." He settled into one of the leather chairs, gesturing for me to sit. "Everyone else is performing, pretending, playing elaborate games of status and submission. But you..." He leaned forward slightly. "You looked at me and saw exactly what I am." "A criminal," I said flatly. His smile returned, sharper this time. "A man who doesn't pretend civilization is anything but a thin coat of paint." I sat on the edge of the opposite chair, keeping my spine straight, my hands steady around the whiskey glass. "That still doesn't explain what you want from me." "Direct. I like that." He rested his elbows on his knees, bringing himself into my space without actually touching me. "I need someone for a particular role, someone who doesn't belong to this world, who isn't corrupted by its politics, who can move through certain spaces without raising a suspicion." My heart rate accelerated. "I'm not interested in whatever illegal, nothing illegal." He cut me off with quiet authority. "I need a date." I blinked. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't even on the list. A date. "My mother is hosting a series of events over the next 2 months. Family gatherings, charity functions, business dinners. She's been aggressively trying to match me with suitable women from appropriate families." He said the words with the kind of disdain usually reserved for discussing vermin. "I need someone to play the role of girlfriend, convincingly enough that she stops." I laughed before I could stop myself. "You're joking." "I don't joke about my mother." He took another sip of whiskey, watching me over the rim of his glass. 2 months. You attend events with me as my companion. We present a united front. When the time period ends, we part ways amicably. You'll be compensated, of course." "Compensated how?" $75,000 plus a wardrobe appropriate to the role, which you keep afterward, plus, he paused, I can open doors for your career. Catherine Westbrook's foundation has been trying to get a meeting with the Moretti Family Trust. That happens. I'll personally ensure a grant that will fund your literacy program for the next 3 years. The numbers hit me like ice water. $75,000. That was more than I made in a year. That was my student loans paid off. That was breathing room I hadn't had since graduating college. And a 3-year grant that would transform everything the foundation could do. But it was also insane. Why me? I asked. There are probably hundreds of women who would want something permanent, he interrupted, who would see this as an audition for the real role. You don't want me, Alexis. You don't want this life. That's precisely why you're perfect. When this ends, you'll walk away without looking back. No complications, no drama, just business. I should have said no. Every rational cell in my body screamed that getting involved with Dante Moretti, even in a fake relationship, was dangerous in ways I couldn't fully anticipate. But the exhaustion of living paycheck to paycheck, of watching other people float through life while I struggled for every inch of ground, it made me reckless. 100,000, I heard myself say, and the meeting with your family trust happens within 3 weeks, not at the end. I'm not trusting you to follow through when you don't need me anymore. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or amusement at my audacity. 100,000, meeting within 3 weeks, but you follow my lead at every event. No improvising, no going off script. This only works if it's believable. And if your mother figures out we're faking, she won't, because we're going to be very, very convincing. He stood and extended his hand. Do we have a deal? I looked at his hand, tanned, strong, with scars across the knuckles that told stories I probably didn't want to know. This was the moment I could stand up, walk away, go back to my safe small life, and pretend this conversation never happened, or I could take the biggest risk of my life and see where it led. I stood and clasped his hand. His grip was firm, warm, sending an unexpected jolt up my arm. Deal. Good. He didn't let go immediately. First event is tomorrow night. Family dinner at my mother's estate in Greenwich. I'll send a car for you at 6. Dress formal, but not flashy. Conservative. She's old-fashioned about women. Tomorrow. Panic fluttered in my chest. That's not enough time to... You'll be fine. He released my hand, and the absence of contact felt strangely significant. All you need to do is smile, be polite, and look at me like you find me tolerable. Think you can manage that? I lifted my chin. I can fake tolerate anyone for $100,000. That surprised a genuine laugh out of him, low and rich. We're going to get along just fine, Alexis Chen. He walked me back through the hallways, this time taking routes that kept us away from the main ballroom. We emerged near the club's entrance, where a valet stand bustled with departing guests. Dante signaled, and within seconds, a black SUV pulled up, its windows tinted dark enough to hide anything happening inside. The driver stepped out, the silver-haired man from earlier, and opened the rear door without speaking. Marco will take you home, Dante said. Text me your address tonight. He pulled a business card from his inner jacket pocket and held it out. It was simple, elegant, just a name and phone number, no title, no company, as if everyone who mattered already knew who he was. I took it, our fingers brushing briefly. And, Alexis? He waited until I looked at him. Don't tell anyone about our arrangement, not your roommate, not Catherine, no one. This only works if people believe it's real. I nodded, suddenly aware of how completely I was entering his world, with all its secrets and shadows. I slid into the SUV's leather interior, and Marco closed the door with a solid thunk that felt like sealing a pact. As we pulled away from the club, I looked back through the rear window. Dante stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching the car disappear into Manhattan traffic. The streetlights cast him in alternating shadow and gold, making him look like something from a myth, beautiful and dangerous and utterly inhuman. What had I just agreed to? The question haunted me the entire drive to Brooklyn through the transfer of my number to Marco's phone. He'd asked politely, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he broke bones for a living, through his insistence on walking me to my building's entrance, as if I were something precious that needed protecting. I climbed 4 flights to my apartment, my mind spinning. Inside, my roommate Jenna was curled up on the couch with her laptop, probably working on another freelance graphic design project. "You're home early," she said, looking up. Then her eyes widened. "What happened to your dress?" "Champagne incident." I kicked off my heels. "Don't ask." "That bad, huh?" "You have no idea." I went to my room and closed the door, then sat on my bed and pulled out Dante's card. The number seemed to glow in the dim light. I saved it in my phone under Dante Moretti and typed out a text. 447 Bergen Street, apartment 3B. What time exactly tomorrow? His response came within seconds. 6 p.m. Dress will be delivered to you by 2 p.m. Wear your hair down. I stared at the message. He was sending me a dress and telling me how to wear my hair. The control should have bothered me more than it did. "Understood," I typed back. "Sleep well, Alexis. Tomorrow you become someone else." I set the phone aside and lay back on my bed, still in my ruined dress. Tomorrow I'd become someone else. The kind of person who dated Dante Moretti. The kind of person who attended family dinners at Greenwich Estates. The kind of person who belonged in that world, even if it was all pretend. The champagne stain had dried into a darker shadow across the fabric. I touched it gently, remembering the humiliation of standing in that ballroom, invisible and irrelevant. That version of me was gone now. Tomorrow I'd become whoever Dante Moretti needed me to be. The question was whether I'd be able to find my way back to myself when it was over. Good. He didn't let go immediately. "First event is tomorrow night. Family dinner at my mother's estate in Greenwich. I'll send a car for you at 6. Dress formal but not flashy. Conservative. She's old-fashioned about women." Tomorrow. Panic fluttered in my chest. "That's not enough time to—" "You'll be fine." He released my hand, and the absence of contact felt strangely significant. "All you need to do is smile, be polite, and look at me like you find me tolerable. Think you can manage that?" I lifted my chin. "I can fake tolerate anyone for $100,000. That surprised a genuine laugh out of him, low and rich. "We're going to get along just fine, Alexis Chen." He walked me back through the hallways, this time taking routes that kept us away from the main ballroom. We emerged near the club's entrance, where a valet stand bustled with departing guests. Dante signaled, and within seconds, a black SUV pulled up, its windows tinted dark enough to hide anything happening inside. The driver stepped out, the silver-haired man from earlier, and opened the rear door without speaking. "Marco will take you home," Dante said. "Text me your address tonight." He pulled a business card from his inner jacket pocket and held it out. It was simple, elegant, just a name and phone number, no title, no company, as if everyone who mattered already knew who he was. I took it, our fingers brushing briefly. "And, Alexis?" He waited until I looked at him. "Don't tell anyone about our arrangement, not your roommate, not Catherine, no one. This only works if people believe it's real." I nodded, suddenly aware of how completely I was entering his world, with all its secrets and shadows. I slid into the SUV's leather interior, and Marco closed the door with a solid thunk that felt like sealing a pact. As we pulled away from the club, I looked back through the rear window. Dante stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching the car disappear into Manhattan traffic. The streetlights cast him in alternating shadow and gold, making him look like something from a myth, beautiful and dangerous and utterly inhuman. What had I just agreed to? The question haunted me the entire drive to Brooklyn through the transfer of my number to Marco's phone. He'd asked politely, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he broke bones for a living, through his insistence on walking me to my building's entrance, as if I were something precious that needed protecting. I climbed 4 flights to my apartment, my mind spinning. Inside, my roommate Jenna was curled up on the couch with her laptop, probably working on another freelance graphic design project. "You're home early," she said, looking up. Then her eyes widened. "What happened to your dress?" "Champagne incident." I kicked off my heels. "Don't ask." "That bad, huh?" "You have no idea." I went to my room and closed the door, then sat on my bed and pulled out Dante's card. The number seemed to glow in the dim light. I saved it in my phone under D. Moretti and typed out a text. 447 Bergen Street, apartment 3B. What time exactly tomorrow? His response came within seconds. 6 p.m. Dress will be delivered to you by 2 p.m. Wear your hair down. I stared at the message. He was sending me a dress and telling me how to wear my hair. The control should have bothered me more than it did. "Understood," I typed back. "Sleep well, Alexis. Tomorrow you become someone else." I set the phone aside and lay back on my bed, still in my ruined dress. Tomorrow I'd become someone else. The kind of person who dated Dante Moretti. The kind of person who attended family dinners at Greenwich Estates. The kind of person who belonged in that world, even if it was all pretend. The champagne stain had dried into a darker shadow across the fabric. I touched it gently, remembering the humiliation of standing in that ballroom, invisible and irrelevant. That version of me was gone now. Tomorrow, I'd become whoever Dante Moretti needed me to be. The question was whether I'd be able to find my way back to myself when it was over. The dress arrived at exactly 2 p.m. in a black garment bag with no label, carried by a woman who introduced herself only as Lucia and proceeded to spend the next 2 hours transforming me. The dress itself was stunning. Deep navy silk that fell to just below my knees, with a modest neckline and 3/4 sleeves. Conservative, like Dante had specified, but cut so perfectly to my body that it felt somehow more intimate than something revealing would have been. Navy Louboutin pumps, a simple strand of pearls that Lucia assured me were genuine, a clutch that matched the shoes. "Your hair," Lucia said in accented English, studying me with a critical eye. She was probably 60, elegantly dressed, with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd been dressing powerful people for decades. He said down. She nodded approvingly and set to work with a curling iron, creating soft waves that fell past my shoulders. Makeup came next, natural but polished, emphasizing my eyes without being dramatic. When she finished, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. I looked expensive. I looked like I belonged next to someone like Dante. "Oh, remember," Lucia said as she packed up her supplies. "Posture. No slouching. When you sit, cross your ankles, not your knees. Don't touch your face or play with your jewelry. And smile, but not too much. You are confident, not eager." "Is there a handbook for this?" I asked weakly. Her stern expression softened slightly. "You'll be fine. He chose you for a reason. Trust that." She left and I sat carefully on the edge of my bed, afraid to wrinkle the dress, watching the clock count down to 6. Jenna knocked on my door at 5:45. "There's a ridiculous car outside and a scary-looking man asking for you." My heart jumped. "I'll be right down." "Alex, what's going on? That dress." "I'll explain later, I promise." I grabbed the clutch and made my way downstairs, my heels clicking on the worn steps. Marco stood beside the same black SUV from last night, looking even more imposing in the late afternoon light. When he saw me, something like approval crossed his face. "Miss Chen," he said, opening the door. "You look very nice." "Thank you, Marco." The drive to Greenwich took about an hour. Marco didn't try to make conversation, for which I was grateful. I spent the time staring out the window, watching Brooklyn give way to Manhattan, then to the suburbs, trying to calm my racing heart. We turned off the highway onto increasingly private roads, past gates and long driveways that hid mansions from view. Finally, we pulled up to a security gate with an actual guardhouse. Marco said something in Italian. The gate swung open, and we drove up a tree-lined drive that seemed to go on forever. The Moretti estate appeared gradually through the trees, a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa that looked like it had been transplanted directly from Tuscany. Warm stone, terracotta tiles, perfectly manicured gardens. It was the kind of place that appeared in Architectural Digest, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. My hands were shaking. Marco pulled up to the front entrance where Dante stood waiting, looking impossibly good in dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He said something to Marco in Italian, then opened my door himself and extended his hand. "You look perfect," he said quietly as I stepped out. "Lucia is a magician. She's been dressing my family for 30 years. If anyone could make this convincing, it's her." He kept hold of my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. Nervous? Terrified. Good, use it. My mother respects people who are intimidated by her. It means they understand the situation. He tucked my hand into the crook of his elbow, and we started toward the entrance. Quick briefing. My mother's name is Isabella. You call her Mrs. Moretti, unless she tells you otherwise. My sister, Chiara, will be here with her husband, Robert. Stay away from him, he's an ass. My youngest brother, Luca, is in graduate school, but home for the weekend. He's harmless. And your father, dead 5 years ago. His voice flattened. Don't bring it up. We reached the massive wooden doors, and they swung open before Dante could knock. A woman in her 60s stood in the entryway, Isabella Moretti. She was stunning, with silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my car would have cost if I had a car. Her dark eyes, so like Dante's, swept over me with surgical precision. "Dante," she said, her accent stronger than her son's. "You're late? Traffic." He kissed both her cheeks. "Mama, this is Alexis Chen. Alexis, my mother. Isabella Moretti." I extended my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Moretti." She looked at my hand for a long moment before taking it briefly. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Chen, this is Chinese. My father's family is from Taiwan. And your mother?" "Irish-American. She grew up in Boston." Isabella made a small humming sound that could have meant anything. "Come, everyone is in the salon." She turned and walked deeper into the house, clearly expecting us to follow. Dante squeezed my hand once, reassurance or warning, I couldn't tell, and we trailed after her through rooms that could have been museum exhibitions. Original art on the walls, furniture that was probably antique, fresh flowers in enormous arrangements. The salon turned out to be a living room the size of my entire apartment, with tall windows overlooking the gardens. A woman who looked like a younger version of Isabella sat on a cream-colored sofa next to a man with thinning hair and an expression of perpetual irritation. That would be Chiara and Robert. A younger man, probably mid-20s, stood by the windows with a drink, Luca. They all turned as we entered. "Everyone," Dante said, his hand moving to the small of my back. "This is Alexis." The room went absolutely still for a moment. Chiara's eyes widened slightly. Robert's narrowed. Luca looked intrigued. Isabella moved to a bar cart and poured herself a glass of red wine with deliberate slowness. "Dante has a girlfriend," Chiara said finally, her tone suggesting this was roughly as likely as him sprouting wings. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong. We've never—" She stood and crossed to me, extending her hand with a genuine smile. "I'm Chiara. It's really nice to meet you." Her grip was warm, and her smile reached her eyes. I decided immediately that I liked her. "Robert," her husband said from the couch, not bothering to stand. "And I'm Luca, the baby of the family." The younger brother approached with easy charm. "Don't let anyone tell you we don't bite. We absolutely do." "Luca," Isabella said sharply. "What? I'm just being honest." He grinned at me. "So, Alexis, how did you manage to capture my brother's attention? He's basically a monk who shoots people." "Luca." This time it was Dante who spoke, his voice dropping into a register that made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. "I'm kidding, sort of." Luca retreated to his position by the windows, but continued watching me with open curiosity. Dinner was announced by a woman in a chef's uniform, and we moved to a formal dining room with a table that could have seated 20, but was set for 6. Dante pulled out my chair, the one to Isabella's right, before sitting at the head of the table himself. Chiara sat across from me, with Robert beside her and Luca at the far end. The first course arrived, some kind of seafood terrine that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce. I waited to see which fork everyone else used, then followed their lead. "So, Alexis," Isabella said, her voice pleasant but her eyes sharp, "what is it you do?" "I work for the Westbrook Foundation. We focus on youth literacy programs and after-school initiatives in underserved communities. Charity work." She took a sip of wine. "This is very noble." There was something in her tone that suggested nobility wasn't actually a compliment. "I find it fulfilling." "And you make a living at this?" "Mama," Dante said quietly, "it's a reasonable question. I'm trying to understand what kind of life you could provide for my son." The implication was clear. I couldn't provide anything close to what he already had, which was true, but hearing it stated so baldly still stung. "I don't need Alexis to provide anything," Dante said, his voice still quiet, but with an edge that made even Isabella pause. "I provide enough for both of us." Chiara jumped in, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. "How did you two meet?" I glanced at Dante. We hadn't discussed this part. "A charity event," he said smoothly. "The Metropolitan Club. Alexis was there for work. I was there avoiding work." He looked at me, and something in his expression shifted into something almost tender. "She told me I was wasting everyone's time, including hers." Luca nearly choked on his wine. "She what?" "She insulted me," Dante continued, his lips curving slightly. It was refreshing. "That's because everyone else is terrified of you," Chiara said, present company included. "I'm not terrified of him," I heard myself say. Everyone looked at me. "He's just a person, a very intimidating person, with significant resources and questionable business associates, but still a person." Silence. Then Lucas started laughing, really laughing, the kind that doubled him over. "Oh my God! Dante, I like her. Can we keep her?" Even Chiara was smiling. Robert looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. And Isabella? Isabella was studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You have courage," she said finally. "This is good. My son needs someone with courage. Too many women are intimidated by what our family is." "Which is what exactly?" I asked before I could stop myself. The table went quiet again, but I'd committed now, so I continued. "Everyone talks around it, makes implications, uses euphemisms. But what is it you think your family is that requires so much courage to be around?" Dante's hand found my knee under the table, squeezing gently. Warning or support, I wasn't sure. Isabella set down her wineglass with deliberate care. "We are a family that values loyalty, that protects its own, that understands power is not given, but taken and held." She leaned forward slightly. "We are a family that makes difficult decisions so that others don't have to. And yes, sometimes those decisions are not clean." "You mean legal," I said. "I mean clean." Her eyes locked on mine. "The world is not a simple place, Miss Chen. It is not divided neatly into good and evil. There are shades, gradations. My family operates in those spaces between what is permitted and what is necessary. That's a very elegant way of describing organized crime." Robert made a strangled sound. Luca's eyes went wide. Chiara looked like she was trying not to smile. Dante's hand tightened on my knee, but he didn't speak. Isabella stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, she smiled. It transformed her face, making her look suddenly younger, more human. "I like you," she said simply. "You are not afraid to speak truth. This is rare." She picked up her wineglass again. "My son has chosen well." The tension in the room broke like a snapped wire. Conversation resumed. The next course arrived. Dante's hand stayed on my knee for the rest of dinner, a warm weight that kept me anchored. After dinner, Isabella insisted on showing me the gardens. It was clearly not optional. Dante started to follow, but his mother waved him away. "I wish to speak with her alone. Go have brandy with your siblings." We walked through the gardens in the cooling evening air. Isabella linked her arm through mine with surprising familiarity, leading me down stone paths between perfectly manicured hedges. "You are not what I expected," she said after a long silence. "What did you expect?" "Someone more polished, someone from our world." She paused beside a fountain, studying the water as it caught the last rays of sunlight. "Dante has always been my most difficult child. Even as a boy, he was too serious, too controlled. After his father died—" She broke off, her expression clouding. "He closed himself off completely, became the man you see now. All business, all control, no joy." I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet. "I have tried for years to find him a suitable match," she continued. "Daughters of other families, women who understand our life. He refused them all, said he didn't have time for such things." She looked at me directly. "And then you, a charity worker from Brooklyn who cannot afford her own dress." The statement should have offended me, but there was no cruelty in how she said it, just observation. "I don't know if I can give him what he needs," I admitted, the truth slipping out before I could stop it. "I don't know if I belong in this world." "Perhaps that is precisely why you do belong." Isabella turned to face me fully. "My son does not need someone who knows how to navigate our world. He needs someone who reminds him there are other worlds, better ones perhaps." She reached out and touched my cheek gently, a surprisingly maternal gesture. "Do you love him?" The question caught me completely off guard. I should have said yes immediately. That was the whole point of this charade. But something about Isabella's directness, her unexpected warmth, made lying feel impossible. "I don't know," I said quietly. "It's complicated." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "At least you are honest. That is more than I usually get." She tucked my arm back through hers and started walking again. "Come, let me show you the rose garden. My husband planted it for me when Dante was born. It is the one place on this property where I can still feel him." We walked in companionable silence, and I realized with growing unease that I actually liked Isabella Moretti, liked her directness, her intelligence, the glimpses of vulnerability beneath her formidable exterior, which made what I was doing, lying to her, deceiving her, feel infinitely worse. The drive back to Brooklyn was quiet. Dante sat close to me in the back seat, his arm stretched along the seat behind my shoulders, not quite touching, but present. "You did well," he said finally as we crossed back into the city. "Better than well. My mother doesn't like anyone. She liked you." I lied to her. "You played a role. There's a difference." "Is there?" I turned to look at him. In the dim light of the car, his face was half in shadow. "She asked if I loved you. I didn't know what to say." "What did you say?" "That it was complicated." He was quiet for a moment, but That might have been the most honest answer you could have given. What does that mean? Instead of answering, he pulled out his phone and typed something. A moment later, mine buzzed. I opened it to see a notification from my bank. A deposit, $50,000. That's half, he said. You earned it tonight. The rest comes when we're done. I stared at the number on my screen. $50,000. It was real. This was actually happening. The meeting with your family trust, I said. You said within 3 weeks. Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. My lawyer will be there, along with the trust's board. Come prepared to make your case for funding. They won't go easy on you just because you're with me. I wouldn't want them to. He smiled at that. No, I don't suppose you would. We pulled up outside my building. Marco started to get out, but Dante stopped him with a gesture and opened my door himself. He walked me to the entrance, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. Same time next Saturday, he said. There's a fundraiser at the Museum of Modern Art. Very public, lots of cameras. That's where we let the world know we're together. More people staring at me. More people seeing that you're mine. He said it casually, but something in the way he looked at me made the words feel heavier than they should have. Get some rest, Alexis. The easy part is over. He waited until I was inside before returning to the car. I watched through the glass door as the SUV pulled away, then climbed the stairs to my apartment on shaking legs. Jenna was waiting, naturally. She took one look at my face and pointed to the couch. Sit, talk, now. So I did. I told her everything, the encounter at the club, the offer, the deal, tonight's dinner, everything except the money. That felt too private, too dangerous to share. Holy shit, Jenna said when I finished. You're fake dating a mafia boss. It's just business. Alex, he looks at you like you're the only person in the room. I saw him through the window when he walked you to the door. That's not business. He's acting. We both are. If you say so. She didn't sound convinced. Just be careful, okay? Men like that, they're dangerous. Not just because of what they do, but because of what they make you want. I thought about that later, alone in my room, still wearing the navy dress because I was afraid to take it off and break whatever spell the evening had cast. I thought about Dante's hand on my knee, his mother's searching questions, the $50,000 now sitting in my bank account, and I thought about what Jenna had said, about danger, about wanting. She was right to be concerned, because somewhere between the library at the Metropolitan Club and the rose garden at the Moretti estate, something had shifted. The lines I'd drawn so carefully in my mind, this is business, this is pretend, this is temporary, had started to blur. I pulled out my phone and looked at Dante's last message. The easy part is over. He was right about that. The hard part was coming. The part where I had to remember that none of this was real, no matter how real it was starting to feel. The week leading up to the MoMA fundraiser passed in a blur of work and preparation. Catherine was thrilled about the meeting with the Moretti Family Trust, though I carefully avoided explaining exactly how I'd secured it. I spent hours preparing the presentation, refining our program's data, crafting the perfect pitch for funding. Lucia appeared twice more, once to deliver a stunning emerald green gown for the fundraiser, Mr. Moretti's orders, and once to go through my existing wardrobe with the kind of brutal honesty usually reserved for intervention television shows. This is not salvageable, she said, holding up my favorite cardigan like it had personally offended her. And this... She gestured at my collection of work clothes. These are fine for your office, but if you're going to be seen with him, we need better. By the end of the week, half my closet had been replaced with clothes I never would have bought for myself. Cashmere sweaters, tailored trousers, silk blouses, a leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Lucia assured me Dante was covering everything, that it was part of the arrangement. It still felt like Pretty Woman, except I was pretty sure Richard Gere's character wasn't actually a criminal. Saturday arrived too quickly. Marco picked me up at 7, and this time the drive felt less terrifying and more surreal. I was getting used to the luxury SUV, to Marco's silent professionalism, to the way the city looked from behind tinted windows. Dante met me at his penthouse in Tribeca, a space I hadn't seen before, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture with million-dollar views. He was already dressed in his tuxedo, looking like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement. "You look incredible," he said, his eyes traveling over the emerald dress in a way that made my skin heat. "Lucia's work. Lucia has good taste, but she didn't choose your face." He crossed to me and held out a jewelry box. "These are for tonight. They're on loan from my mother." Inside was a diamond necklace that caught the light like captured starfire. I stared at it, unable to move. "I can't wear this." "You can, and you will. Every society photographer in New York will be at this event. They need to believe you belong next to me." He took the necklace from the box and moved behind me. "May I?" I nodded, unable to speak as his fingers brushed my neck. The diamonds settled against my collarbones, cool and heavy. In the mirror across the room, I saw a woman I barely recognized, elegant, confident, wearing $500,000 in borrowed jewelry like it was nothing. "Perfect," Dante murmured. His hands rested on my shoulders for a moment longer than necessary. "Ready to become public?" "No, but let's do it anyway." The museum was chaos. Valets, photographers, crowds of people, in evening wear ascending the stairs like a glittering river. Dante's hand found the small of my back as we exited the car, and immediately the cameras started flashing. "Mr. Moretti, over here." "Who's your date?" "Dante, look this way." He ignored them all, guiding me steadily up the stairs. But at the entrance he paused and turned back to face the photographers, pulling me closer to his side. His arm wrapped around my waist, confident and possessive. The cameras went wild. "What's her name, Dante?" "How long have you been together?" He leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Smile like you love me." I turned my face toward his, and for just a moment, with his eyes on mine and his hand warm against my waist, it wasn't hard to pretend. The cameras captured it all, the way he looked at me, the way I looked back, the intimacy of the moment. Then we were inside, and the spell broke. The gala was everything I'd expected: champagne, art, beautiful people making beautiful conversation. But this time was different. This time I wasn't invisible. I was with Dante Moretti, which meant everyone wanted to know who I was. "Dante, darling." A woman in head-to-toe Chanel materialized in front of us. "Introduce me to your friend." For the next 2 hours it was a parade of introductions: wealthy donors, business associates, politicians, people whose names I recognized from newspapers. Dante kept me close the entire time, his hand never leaving my waist or the small of my back, making sure everyone understood I was with him. And people watched. I could feel their eyes following us, hear the whispers as we passed. Dante Moretti had brought a date. Dante Moretti was in a relationship. Who was she? Where did she come from? What made her special? "You're doing great," Dante murmured as we moved from one conversation to another. "Just keep breathing." "I feel like an exhibit." "You are. That's the point. He guided me toward a quieter corner near a Rothko painting. 5 more minutes, then we can slip out to the terrace for air. But we didn't make it 5 minutes. A man approached, late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit. There was something about the way he moved that set off alarm bells. Dante's entire body tensed beside me. "Vincent," Dante said, his voice flat. "Dante." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I heard rumors you'd finally found someone willing to tolerate you. Had to see for myself. This is Alexis Vincent Catalano, an old family friend." The way he said friend made it clear Vincent was anything but. I extended my hand politely. Vincent took it, but his grip lasted too long, his thumb rubbing across my knuckles in a way that made my skin crawl. "Charming," Vincent said, still holding my hand. "Tell me, Alexis, does Dante bore you with his rules and his control? Because I promise I could show you a much better time." Dante moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment Vincent was holding my hand. The next Dante had positioned himself between us. His entire demeanor shifted into something dark and dangerous. "Touch her again," Dante said quietly, "and I'll break every finger on that hand." Vincent's smile widened. Still so protective, some things never change. He looked past Dante to me. "Be careful with this one, sweetheart. The Morettis have a habit of breaking beautiful things." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Dante stood rigid, his hands clenched into fists. "Dante," I said softly. "Who was that?" "No one. A ghost from the past." He turned to me, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. "I need air. Come with me." He didn't wait for an answer, just took my hand and pulled me through the crowd toward the terrace. Outside, the city spread before us, glittering and infinite. The sounds of the party faded to a muffled hum. Dante moved to the railing, gripping it hard enough that his knuckles went white. I gave him space, waiting. "Vincent Catalano," he said finally, "runs the Brooklyn docks. Or he did until my father took them from him 20 years ago. He's been waiting for a chance at revenge ever since." He turned to face me. "Bringing you here was a mistake. Making you visible was a mistake. I just painted a target on your back. You're being dramatic. I'm being realistic." He crossed to me, his expression intense. "People like Vincent, they understand leverage. And now you're leverage, because if anyone wants to get to me, they go through the people I care about." The words hung in the air between us. The people I care about. "This is fake," I said, more to remind myself than him. "Everyone knows that eventually, so I'm not really leverage because you don't actually." He kissed me. One moment I was talking, the next his hands were in my hair and his mouth was on mine, and the entire world narrowed to that single point of contact. The kiss was fierce, desperate, nothing like the careful performance I'd expected. This was real, raw, terrifying in its intensity. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. That, he said roughly, did not feel fake. I couldn't speak, couldn't think past the feeling of his hands still tangled in my hair, his forehead resting against mine. "I'm sorry," he continued. "This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to be safe, just business. But somewhere between my mother's rose garden and right now, it stopped being business for me. Dante, you don't have to say anything. I know this wasn't part of the deal. I know you didn't sign up for..." He gestured vaguely at himself. "For this, for me, for real." I should have stepped back, should have reminded him of the boundaries we'd set, should have protected myself from the complication of actual feelings in an arrangement designed to be temporary. Instead, I kissed him back. This time it was slower, softer, but no less intense. His hands moved from my hair to my waist, pulling me closer. I could feel his heartbeat against my chest, rapid and unsteady, matching my own. When we finally broke apart, he was looking at me like I was something precious and terrifying at the same time. "What are we doing?" I whispered. "I have absolutely no idea." He traced his thumb across my cheekbone. "But I don't want to stop." The terrace door opened behind us. "Dante, there you are." Chiara stepped out, then stopped when she saw us. A smile spread across her face. "Oh, sorry, I can come back." "What is it?" Dante asked, not moving away from me. "Mother sent me to find you. She wants a family photo for the Foundation's newsletter." Chiara's smile turned mischievous. "And she specifically asked that Alexis be in it. You know, since you're family now." I looked at Dante in panic. A family photo that would be published. That would make this even more real, more public, more impossible to walk away from. "It's okay," he said quietly, reading my expression. "Only if you want to." But we both knew I didn't really have a choice. Not if we wanted this charade to continue. Not if I wanted the funding for the foundation. Not if I wanted whatever this was becoming between us. "Okay," I said. "Let's take a photo." Chiara led us back inside to where Isabella was holding court with a professional photographer. The whole family was gathering: Luca, Chiara, and Robert, and now Dante and me. Isabella positioned me right next to her, with Dante on my other side, his arm around my waist. "Closer," the photographer directed. "Dante, pull her in more. Alexis, relax your shoulders. This is a family photo, not a hostage situation." Luca snorted. Isabella shot him a look that could have frozen fire. The camera flashed, again and again, and with each flash I felt the trap closing, tighter around me. Because this was no longer just business. This was no longer just pretend. Somewhere between the fake dating arrangement and this moment, I'd fallen for Dante Moretti. The man, not the myth. The person who planted rose gardens for his dead father and protected his family with ruthless efficiency and kissed me on terraces like I was the only solid thing in his world. And the truly terrifying part, I was pretty sure he'd fallen for me too. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. More introductions, more photographs, more performances of a relationship that was becoming uncomfortably real. By the time Marco drove us back to Dante's penthouse, I was exhausted in every possible way. "Come up," Dante said as the car stopped. "Please, we need to talk about what happens next." I should have said no. Should have gone home to my safe apartment where I could think clearly. But I followed him up to the penthouse anyway, because apparently I was committed to making every possible mistake. Inside, he poured us both whiskey and led me to the massive windows overlooking the city. We stood side by side, not touching, the silence heavy between us. "I meant what I said on the terrace," he said finally. "This stopped being business for me." I don't know when exactly, but it did. "This is a terrible idea," I said. "You know that, right? I'm not equipped for your world. I don't know the rules. I don't have the background. I don't care about any of that. Your mother does. Your family does. Your business associates do. Let me worry about them." He turned to face me. "The question is what you want, Alexis. Do you want this to stay fake? Do you want to finish out the 2 months, take your money, and walk away? Because I'll honor that. I'll give you everything we agreed on, and I won't make it complicated. And if I don't want to walk away?" His expression shifted into something unguarded, hopeful, terrifying. "Then we figure it out together. We take this slow. We see where it goes. No more pretending. Your world is dangerous. Vincent made that clear. I'll protect you. That's not negotiable. And when people find out the truth, that this started as a transaction, that you paid me to play your girlfriend, then we tell them the truth." He stepped closer, that I hired you for a role, and somewhere along the way, you became the realest thing in my life. God help me, I believed him. This is insane, I whispered, completely. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. But I've built an empire on insane decisions. What's one more? I knew I should think about this, should take time to consider all the implications, should protect myself from the inevitable heartbreak of falling for a man whose world was built on violence and secrets. But I'd spent my whole life being careful, being safe, playing by the rules. And where had it gotten me? To a studio apartment and a dead-end job and a life that felt too small for the dreams I'd once had. Maybe it was time to make an insane decision of my own. I set down my whiskey glass and kissed him. This time there was no hesitation, no careful performance. This was messy and real and exactly what I wanted. His hands found my waist, then my back, pulling me closer. My fingers tangled in his hair, and I felt him smile against my lips. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "That's a yes. God help us both." "God help us both," he echoed. Then he kissed me again, and the city glittered below us, and somewhere in my mind, I knew this was the moment everything changed, the moment I stopped pretending, the moment it became real. The Westbrook Foundation's annual report sat on my new desk in my new office with my new title, Director of Development, printed neatly on the nameplate. The 3-year grant from the Moretti Family Trust had been approved, funded, and was already transforming what we could do. We'd opened 2 new literacy centers, hired 50 new staff members, expanded our after-school programs to 3 more neighborhoods. Catherine had been thrilled, right up until I'd given my notice. "You're leaving," she'd said, genuinely shocked, "but you just got promoted." "I need to start something of my own," I'd explained. "The Moretti Trust is backing me in creating a new foundation, one that focuses on the gap between charitable intentions and real community needs." She had congratulated me, of course, but I'd seen the calculation in her eyes, the understanding that my relationship with Dante Moretti had opened doors she'd never been able to access. She wasn't wrong. My phone buzzed. A text from Dante. "Dinner tonight, Mama wants to show you her wedding venue ideas." I smiled and typed back, "Tell your mother we've been dating for 3 months. We're not getting married. You tell her. I value my life." Coward, absolutely. That's why I date women brave enough to stand up to her for me. I was still smiling when Jenna appeared in my doorway. "You're glowing. It's disgusting." "I'm not glowing." "You're definitely glowing. You've been glowing for 3 months." She flopped into the chair across from my desk. "So, is it weird? The real thing versus the fake thing?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Sometimes I catch myself performing, then realize I don't have to anymore, that it's just us. And the danger? The Mafia stuff. I'd be lying if I said it didn't scare me, but Dante keeps me separate from most of it, and Marco's with me whenever Dante can't be." I paused. I know it's not normal, I know it's complicated, but it's also real in a way nothing else in my life has ever been. Jenna studied me for a long moment. "You love him?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yeah, I do." "Does he know?" "I think so. Neither of us has said it yet. We're both too stubborn. Or too scared." That too. That evening, I met Dante at the restaurant, where we had our first real date, the one after we decided to stop pretending. He was already there, sitting at our usual table in the back, and when he saw me, his entire face transformed. That was what always got me. The way he looked at me like I was the best part of his day, like I was something precious he couldn't quite believe he got to keep. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hey yourself." He reached across the table and took my hand. "How was your day?" "Good, productive. Your mother texted me 17 times about color schemes. I'll talk to her." You won't. You're terrified of her. Accurate. He smiled. But in my defense, you are too. Also accurate. We ordered dinner, fell into easy conversation about our days, our plans for the weekend, all the mundane details of two people building a life together. It should have felt ordinary. Instead, it felt miraculous, because this quiet dinner, this comfortable conversation, this simple moment, was something I'd never thought I'd have. Not with him, not in this life. After dinner, we walked through the city together. Dante's hand found mine, our fingers interlacing naturally. Marco followed at a discreet distance, ever present but unobtrusive. I'd gotten used to the security, to the careful choreography of dating someone who needed to be protected as much as he protected others. We ended up at Brooklyn Bridge Park, looking out at the water with Manhattan glittering across the way. Dante pulled me back against his chest, his arms wrapping around my waist, his chin resting on top of my head. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. My heart jumped. Okay. I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between us, simple and profound. I turned in his arms to face him, and in his eyes I saw everything: vulnerability, certainty, hope. I've been in love with you since the terrace at MoMA, he continued. Maybe before that, maybe since you insulted me in that hallway. I don't know exactly when it happened, just that it did, and I needed you to know. Tears pricked my eyes. You're supposed to be smooth. That was terrible. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I'm out of practice. It's been a while since I felt anything real. Good thing I'm not dating you for your romantic speeches. I reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight stubble along his jaw. I love you too, even though you're a controlling, overprotective crime lord with a terrifying mother and questionable business ethics. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Your bar is very low. Lucky for you. He kissed me there, with the city lights reflected in the water, and Marco politely looking the other way, and the whole impossible future stretching out before us. It wasn't a fairy tale, it wasn't simple, it wasn't safe, but it was real, and after a lifetime of playing it safe, real was exactly what I needed.